Join us in the fight to restore liberty and American exceptionalism. Together, let's make the case that our charters of freedom are worth defending and honoring. Right here is where the great American experiment comes alive. Let's get to work. We've got to keep the focus on life, right? We keep the focus on life because we understand that the Constitution is there to ensure that government protects life, right? Pursuit of happiness, right? That's a different argument. We have to refocus them back to the life issue and remind them that if this is life, there is an inherent right that this entity has, the baby has, to maintain that life, to continue on and not have that life terminated simply because they are deemed an inconvenience or they cannot pursue their own individual happiness because now they have the child. So let's talk about some other things here. Society cannot care for more children. Nothing can be further from the truth. Take a look at this. This is what we pay every year in our culture on any number of issues. We pay $1 billion a year for peanuts, $1.2 billion a year for popcorn, movie box office receipts, $4.8 billion, candy, $6 billion a year, ice cream, $10 billion a year, soft drinks, $30 billion a year. Don't tell me society can't pay for this. We spend a lot of money on a lot of things that are absolutely insignificant from my perspective. Restaurant dining, $173 billion a year. On beer, $50 billion. Legal gambling, $300 billion. Pet grooming for crying out loud, $175 million a year. Heaters, $37 million. Sporting goods, $2.2 billion. Guns and ammunition, $10 billion a year. So the list goes on and on and on. Quit buying into the idea that we're not able to do these things. We spend a lot of money on a lot of different things. It's a matter of prioritizing what it is that we want to protect. I remember several years ago, I was there and I watched my wife. They said, how do you do all these things? We have 6 kids and my wife's doing so many things and supporting what it is that I do. And the question was, how do you juggle all these issues? And my wife says, I don't juggle anything. I establish priorities. And if there's anything in my life where my top priorities would be compromised, I don't choose that thing. I reject that thing outright. We live in a culture that is juggling a lot of issues, but more than that, they're establishing priorities. TV, entertainment, cable is more important than these priorities. See, we live in a culture that has turned the most essential, important priorities on its head. And entertainment is more important than taking care of a child. Well, you made the choice. Let's be absolutely brutally honest and call a spade a spade. You're the one who chose to have that one-night stand. You're the one who chose to get into a relationship and engage in activity that produced that child. You cannot now ask the government to protect you in avoiding the consequences of what you did. We are responsible human beings, and we have to live sometimes with consequences that may be inconvenient. But you should not be able to use your poor choice to have government step in and defend your poor choice. Yes?
Even sociologists are now acknowledging we live in an age of entitlement.
Right.
That's what sociologists
absolutely.
are calling it that.
Right. And so this is, for those of you that haven't heard me speak before, speak on a number of issues. Any number of issues. I've created over 100 hours of content, all focusing on the Constitution. This is 2 hours of 100 hours that I've created. And this is, the pro-life presentation that you're seeing here today. But as we go out and talk throughout the country, our issue is that what we're dealing with in America today, it is a cultural issue. It is a cultural battle that we're dealing with. And sometimes we as Americans that are on the right side, if you will, we focus on the election cycle battles. We focus on that next election. We focus on going to the ballot box in 2014 and in 2016. That's what we're focusing on. If we really want to change the culture long term, we have to do just that, engage the culture. We have to start changing the way people think about these ideas and discuss these ideas. You have sociologists doing something because they're the product of this culture that we've allowed to be created really over the last 100 years. So what we're really talking about is understanding that we're going after the dinosaur. And it's going to be a tough battle. This is going to be tough. These are things that we can utilize, but you need a lot of people that are going to come together to begin making these arguments. And more than that, we've got to come together and say, you know what, we're willing to have the debate. Sometimes we don't want to have the debate. We sit in our own circles and say, well, of course they're wrong. Now we got to go on the offensive, and we got to start having these discussions. That's the way we're going to have to change the culture. You know, I was every Sunday night in my family, we have what we call Constitution Night. And we talk about these ideas. And I asked my 14-year-old boy, I said, I want to ask you about the pro-life, pro-choice issue. So what do you think? Does a woman have a choice, legal choice, to abort the child? What do you stand? And my boy says, yeah, I think the woman should have a choice. And I said, son, I want to talk to you about this. He says, well, this is what I'm being taught in school. This is what they're teaching. And then, of course, being able to weigh out. Let's talk about both sides. Let's talk about the Constitution. Let's talk about the rule of law. Let's talk about the Declaration of Independence. And then let's talk about how you would conclude. And so just drawing out those arguments, you know, my kids go to the public schools. They do. And unfortunately, they're not being taught the other side. Understand, this is a cultural issue. The only way you change what's going on in the schools is by changing to a large degree the culture and the way they think about these things, then changing your school boards, changing the curriculum. Because when I teach in my college class, what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with the product of the public schools. And they come in, and the most common thing that my students will tell me in the classroom, whether it's their first week or after spending 16 weeks in the classroom, it's this: why have I never heard these ideas before? That is the most common complaint. 17 years old to 85 years old coming through this college classroom, and that is the most common complaint. Why have I never heard these ideas before? Because our culture has said, you don't need to know the other side. We don't want to educate you, we want to indoctrinate you. And so real education means talking about both sides. Listen, I don't have a problem about talking about the pro-choice issue in schools. I don't. I have a problem when that's the only thing they're being taught. Let them hear both sides and then let them decide for themselves. Because we know in the contest of ideas, almost always the right ideas and the good ideas prevail. There's a reason why the good ideas and the right ideas are not prevailing in America today. Because we are not exposing those ideas to the culture in a way that makes it relevant and in a way that makes it impossible to ignore. We've got to change that. And we can change that, but we have to have our game plan together. We have to understand what the ground game looks like, and this ground game involves going out and having the conversation and doing it in a way that is very, to a degree, non-confrontational. I'm not saying that we're not going to get down and dirty. We got to get down and dirty to a degree as we defend what I believe is the most important issue in America today in terms of defending the Constitution and defending life. This is one of the most important things. And when you look at politicians, individuals running for office, I think if you can determine whether or not an individual is pro-choice or pro-life, that'll tell you volumes about where he stands politically. Because you can look at pro-life issues and a politician who votes pro-life, and you can look at how he votes on taxes. If he votes pro-life here, it's very, very likely that he will resist attempts to raise your taxes. Because if he values life, he's probably going to value property as well. This is important. If he doesn't value life, then why in the world would he value your property? If he doesn't value life, why in the world would he value your fundamental liberty to worship as you see fit? If he doesn't value life, why in the world would he care about your Second Amendment right to defend yourself? See, this is, I did this training about 2 years ago, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, pro-life issue? Man, move away from that issue. We don't need to talk about that issue right now. There's so many other more important issues. And I'm thinking, no, nothing could be further from the truth. If I only have one question and I'm able to get a truthful answer of a politician, this is the one I want to know. Because more than anything else, I can determine where he's going to go with all those other issues. Property, the pursuit of happiness, due process, freedom of speech, free assembly, free exercise of religion, the right to defend yourself, the right to be left alone, government following the rules. I know that there's a good possibility where he's going to come down. Now, am I going to be right 100% of the time? Are we going to be right 100% of the time when we say he's pro-life here, then he's going to vote this way? No. But it's a great gauge, and it's a gauge that we need to look at. I was thinking about Samuel Adams. It was Samuel Adams who said, if we suffer tamelessly attack on our freedom, on our liberty, we encourage it. This is what we're doing right now. We're tamelessly suffering an attack on liberty, on life in America. And when you tamelessly suffer an attack as a culture, you encourage this sort of thing. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to stand up and be firm, walk lockstep, arm in arm, knowing that the truth is on our side, logic is on our side, and the Constitution is on our side. I mean, these things have to be advocated. Let's go to the right to control the body. We hear that a lot. Well, we know that there's another body that's ultimately involved here. The unborn child is not a part of the woman's body, but a genetically distinct entity. It's attached to the mother, but is not a part of her. We know that the child with the right technology can exist independently of the mother. We know that. I mean, children 5, 6 months old can exist with some help outside of the mother. It's reliant on the mother. It's not necessarily a part of the mother. No consensus on abortion. We don't have a consensus here. And we look back at the Roe v. Wade case, and that was really the argument of the justice who wrote that opinion. Oh, there's no consensus. You know, we got these amicus briefs. And an amicus brief is a friend of the court, meaning other entities outside of the chief litigants are submitting briefs to try and influence the judges. And you had doctors on both sides of the debate saying it's absolutely a life, scientifically it's a life, and then others saying we're not quite so sure that it is in fact a life. So they're going back and forth. And it's Roe v. Wade comes out in their majority decision, says, well, there's no consensus. Therefore, we are going to default to the position that it's not life. That's just silliness. There's no consensus on abortion. Well, there's no consensus on slavery either. Should we abolish slavery? Or do we bring it back? Because there's no consensus, there's disagreement. DUI laws, there's a lot of contention out there. Drug laws, there's a lot of contention out there on certain rights. The right to bear arms. There's a lot of contention out there on those things as well. We got to talk about those things as well. We don't go, and here's what we need to do in the argument. Go back to something where we know that now there's a lot of consensus. But back then there wasn't. But we stood up as a culture and said no more. Because we recognized that there was a fundamental liberty at play here. That's the important thing. I personally oppose the dismembering of an unborn child, but you can do it if you like. I won't force my morality on you. Well, let me ask you, are you opposed to murder? Burglary, rape, robbery? Yeah, you're personally opposed. Well, if you're personally opposed to those things, are you going to make an exception like you do with abortion? Of course not, because you recognize what's at stake, right? It's very personal to you because you see these things going on each and every day in our culture. You read it in the newspaper, you hear about it from the various police departments, you hear about it from the prosecutors and what they're doing. It's very real to you. That's nonsense to say you're personally opposed to something, but. Well, there's a lot of things out here in our laws that you might be, personally opposed to killing other people, personally opposed to burglarizing other people's home, but you don't stand back and say you can do it if you want to. We don't allow that. When there's fundamental liberties at stake or life at stake, we stand strong. Because only women get pregnant, men should stay out of the debate. I always love this one. You hear this from the feminists all the time. Well, let's talk about that. Since only military personnel know what it's like to fight in battle, only they should discuss the morality of war. Only they should discuss whether or not we're going to war. That's not how it works in our culture. Since female sportscasters have no clue what it's like to be kicked in the groin while playing football, only men sportscasters should be broadcasting the Super Bowl. Okay, it's just silliness. It's just absolute silliness to say I can't be involved in the debate because I'm not the one carrying the child. That's illogical and it is silly. Since only black people were subject to slavery, no one else has a right to condemn it. Number one, that's untrue to a large degree, that only black people were subject to slavery, but the majority of them were black. Does that mean that because I wasn't a part of the majority or my skin is not a particular color that I can't be involved in the debate? That's silliness. Only Jewish people have a right to condemn the Holocaust. But I can't be involved in that debate either? No, that's silliness. Again, what these things are designed to do, newspaper to the nose, let's get back to the issue. That's silliness. It's a quick soundbite. Let's get back to the issue. Okay? Stay out of the bedroom. I love this one. So I'll do this in the classroom as we debate the pro-life issue, pro-choice issue. I'll say, why can't the government be involved? Why shouldn't they be involved in stopping you from doing these things? Well, government just needs to stay out of the bedroom. Well, what do you mean stay out of the bedroom? They have no right to know what's going on inside the home. No right whatsoever. Just stay out of the bedroom, stay out of the house entirely. Absolutely. I have a right to be left alone in my house. Nothing can go on. I said, you really believe that? Yeah, I really believe that. Huh. So you're allowed to commit the crime of rape if it's inside the four walls of your own home? Having a party at your house and it's inside your own home, you're allowed to steal from those people at gunpoint? You're allowed to molest children inside your home? You're allowed to manufacture drugs inside your own home? Oh, yeah, you're not allowed to do those things. You do have an element of privacy in your own home, but you may not commit crime inside your home. It doesn't matter if it's inside the four walls of that home and you own it. It does not matter. And that's why I noted some of these: rape, incest, child molestation, abuse, child pornography. Simply because it happens inside your own home doesn't make it any more inappropriate. So, stay out of the bedroom. Fundamental right to life. We know here we are endowed by our Creator with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You cannot deprive an individual of life without due process of law. When we go out and we are confident about those things that we believe in, and we're in those environments, knowing what our ammunition consists of, right, it's very tough. It's easy to yell out and scream and heckle and do all those things. It's an entirely different story to actually come up and try and hold your ground in front of a group of people. So, and that's the way they've been trained. Just heckle. Call them a racist. Call them a homophobe. Call them a bigot. You'll shut them down if you call them names, right? That's what they teach the other side. We've got to learn to defend against those things. And how do you defend against those things? You ignore them. You don't deal with them. You stay on task. You stay on the issue. And so the questions I ask these students to really establish common ground right up front is this. There are three questions. Do you want to be told what to do? Number one, do you want to be told what to do? I've never had one student in all of the places that I've traveled, especially on college campuses, where a student raised their hand and said, I'm all about being told what to do. Next question. Do you believe that government should have to follow the rules? Everyone raises their hand. You know those guys that think I'm their enemy? They're raising their hands. They believe government should have to follow the rules. The question is, what is the rule book? That's what we end up debating. And I believe, along with you, that the rule book is the Constitution. The problem is, they will probably concede to a degree that the Constitution is the rule book, but they'll just say, well, my interpretation of the rule book is different than yours. Well, let's have that conversation. How is it different? Most of them again, they're operating on sound bites. If you challenge them on the text of the Constitution, they have no idea, as a general rule, what they're talking about, especially these young college kids. Right? Oh yeah, the Constitution, but my interpretation is different. Okay, well tell me where it's different. Do you believe the individual should have the freedom to speak? Yeah. Do you believe there should be exceptions to that rule? Well, I guess not. Well, the rule book also says I have a right to bear arms. Do you disagree with that? Right? And so having them talk about the parameters of government authority is a great discussion to have. And the third issue that I love talking about is, do you believe you should be able to keep the fruits of your labor? Do you believe you should be able to keep what you earn? See, these are 3 points that cross party lines. They cross political boundaries. And this is the way that I get in with these college kids to start discussing these issues. And as I discuss those 3 questions, this pro-life, pro-choice debate takes on a different life. Because I've already established common ground with the person that I'm about to debate with. They believe that they don't want to be told what to do. Now, they don't want to be told what to do, and so they'll try and use that argument against you. Well, you are trying to tell me what to do. You're telling me what I have to do with my body. Now I've just given you some of those points to outline. No. It's not about making a choice. You already had the choice to decide what you were going to do with your body, and you chose to get pregnant. You chose to be negligent in your activity with another human being. You made the choice already. You had the choice. Nobody told you what to do. You made the choice. Now let's talk about the consequences of your choice, because now it's a different ball game. It's a different ball game because a human life is involved. And if you believe government should have to follow the rules, that means that government must protect life. The rule book says that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The rule book says that government must protect life. And it seems to me that you would stand behind that because you stand behind homicide statutes. You stand behind robbery statutes. You stand behind aggravated assault. You're all about protecting life. You and I agree on those ideas. So why isn't that government would not step in to continue playing out that rule book and protecting life under these circumstances? Well, and then they go into their arguments. Oh, you're a guy. You shouldn't be. Well, okay. Well, let's talk about the fact that I'm a guy and I shouldn't be involved in this debate. I've got the newspaper to the nose. Let's get back to life. Let's get back to the rule book. So, John Adams made it very clear. Liberty must be supported at all hazards. And he's exactly right. It must be supported at all hazards. My hope is you got on our email list. We've got a lot of great programs coming up, a lot of things that we just launched here that we'd love for you to be a part of. Very passionate about bringing things back to the rule of law, defending our fundamental freedoms. These things are under attack and we've got to rise up. And as John Adams said, liberty has to be protected at all hazards. We cannot tamelessly suffer an attack on our liberties, and we can't sit back and do nothing. Because when we do nothing, Voltaire perhaps said it best, when you do nothing, tyrants will rise up and snatch your freedom away. Freedom can only be defended by an active people. These are the things that we have to do. Now, if you're interested in any of the things that I outlined here today, I'm going to put together just a sheet and more than willing to send that out to you. But thank you all so much for having me today. And with that, Jason, thank you as well.